Thank you for tuning in. Our next presenter is Chris Sato, CFO of Spectral. Mr. Sato, you may begin.
Hi, thank you very much. Nice to be here. I also have with me Dr. Paul Walker, President and CEO of Spectral Medical. We'll just hop into the presentation here. And Ali, if you can skip to the Spectral investment highlights, I'll just give a brief background on Spectral Medical. So Spectral Medical is a clinical stage medical device company creating next generation products for the treatment of significant critical care needs, specifically in the areas of septic shock and dialysis. Our product portfolio, which includes the sepsis diagnostic EAA and the companion septic shock therapy PMX, and our dialysis products SAMI and DIMI, are creating new treatment options for critical care needs. On the sepsis side, Spectral is committed to commercializing a treatment for patients with endotoxemic septic shock utilizing our proprietary EAA diagnostic and PMX filter in the U.S. market. Septic shock is what I'd say is a big issue globally. Specifically in the U.S., it's a leading cause of death in the ICUs and a leading contributor to healthcare costs. Each year in the U.S., there's about 330,000 patients who develop septic shock, and it's a pretty nasty disease. It's got a mortality rate of 40 to 50%. Our addressable market is a subset of those 330,000 patients, with approximately 120,000 patients suffering from what we call endotoxemic septic shock each year. And this represents a U.S. addressable market of about $1.5 billion per year. We're currently running our TIGRIS trial. This is an open label phase 3 FDA trial for PMX. Now, we believe this is a de-risk trial, and Paul will expand upon that a little further in the presentation. But at a very high level, we're at a favorable starting point for our TIGRIS trial. Our FDA approval process allows the inclusion of a subset of positive data from our previously run EUPHRATES trial for PMX. We just need to add 150 patients and show the same results as in the 178 patient subset to get through approvals. From a PMX commercialization perspective, we have de-risked commercialization through our exclusive distribution agreement with Baxter, which we entered into in early February of 2020. What makes this agreement so good is that the full commercial burden is solely Baxter's responsibility. So we don't have to build up a sales force. We don't have to spend a penny on sales and marketing, building out a sales force. We have contracted strong commercial terms with initial and milestone payments from Baxter, robust minimum quantities and minimum pricing for PMX from Baxter, as well as robust distribution economics resulting in approximately 60 to 70% net EBITDA margins to Spectral. Second, Baxter is the best commercialization partner bar none for this product, with approximately 40% market share with their ICU presence and installed critical care devices in the U.S. Now, this should expedite market penetration of PMX well beyond what Spectral could do on a go-it-alone basis. So that's our sepsis side. On the dialysis side, our wholly owned subsidiary, Dialco Medical, is introducing disruptive technologies for the dialysis device market. Our devices, SAMI and DIMI, address patient needs across the dialysis spectrum for both acute and chronic dialysis. Dialco's addressable market is anticipated to grow to approximately $5.5 billion by 2025. And some of the key highlights are that, we have disruptive technology. Our devices remove operational complexity from dialysis treatments for both patients and providers. They're designed to be portable. They're easier to use than existing devices amongst several characteristics. And we are moving forward with commercialization at this point. Our SAMI device for the acute market, which is ICU dialysis, is already FDA cleared and Health Canada approved. We have existing influencer customers, and we continue to build on RFP pipelines and clinical evaluation activities in the U.S. and Canada. And while the market for SAMI is much smaller than for DIMI, this is important for the adoption of our DIMI device. SAMI and DIMI are similar devices, basically with the same operational guts. The SAMI user experience amongst clinical influencers provides awareness and real-world experience as we look to penetrate the chronic dialysis market. Our DIMI device for the chronic market, which is dialysis for clinics, dialysis in skilled nursing facilities, and ultimately dialysis in home, which is the biggest market, was recently FDA cleared for use in hospital and clinical settings. There are a few further FDA approvals required to unlock full commercial avenues for DIMI, including for PD modality and in-home use. With that, I'll hand it over to Paul to discuss our PMX product and our TIGRIS trial.
Thanks very much, Chris. I'd like to go now to slide 5. So sepsis remains a very large unmet medical need as well as a huge commercial opportunity. Sepsis is an inflammatory process that may be initiated by multiple causes, including infection, circulating mediators, trauma, or burns. This inflammatory process results in multiple organ failure that may cause death. The most common driver of this inflammatory process is endotoxemia, and this occurs when this very toxic mediator leaks from the bowel into the bloodstream. On slide 5, you can, as Chris has pointed out, it's a huge market with approximately 1.7 million patients every year in the United States diagnosed with sepsis. Our target market, as Chris said, is approximately 100 to 110,000 patients every year that suffer from this problem. The next slide, slide 6, shows Spectral's approach, and it's a very unique approach. Other large pharmas have tried to produce a sepsis therapeutic. Most have failed because they have considered all causes of sepsis to be the same. We have focused entirely on the endotoxemic group, the largest of the group of sepsis. Our process begins with the EAA, which is a diagnosis for endotoxemia. It's the only diagnostic that exists, and it's our proprietary product, FDA approved, Health Canada approved, and CE marked. The therapeutic, we partner with this, called PMX, is an inline filter that takes endotoxin out of the bloodstream. This is a product that has a great deal of clinical body of evidence. There are multiple papers. It's been used in over 200,000 treatments around the world. The EUPHRATES trial was run in North America, a randomized prospective blinded trial. And while we did not meet our primary reduction of mortality endpoint, we found a group that had a very significant benefit from this treatment. And in fact, it was the largest group within the post-hoc analysis. This was presented to the FDA, and we have a clear registration pathway going forward now based on this trial. So on the next slide, it just reviews some of the real-world experience with the endotoxin removal cartridge called PMX. So this is a widely used outside of North America with over 200,000 patients treated and a very good safety profile. When we go to the next slide, we can see lessons that we learned from the EUPHRATES trial. And that is that patients with a MOD score greater than 9, which is the multiple organ dysfunction scoring system, which really shows that there are 3 organs failing, patients have a high chance of dying, that the level of endotoxemia determines their outcome. And what we found is there are a group of patients that have so much endotoxin present that our current dosage of therapeutic intervention was not enough. In that group where we could address the endotoxin level, again, about 80% of our patients were able to show a 29% relative risk reduction, which was impressive to us and to the FDA. So what we've negotiated with the FDA is shown on slide 9. And this is a trial design that's very advantageous for us. First of all, it's only U.S. sites. Secondly, it's randomized 2-to-1, meaning there are 2 treated patients for every control, and it's an open label trial, meaning that we actually know how these patients are doing. It also allowed us to keep 179 patients in this trial from the EUPHRATES trial that have the same characteristics as patients that are going forward in the TIGRIS trial. So basically, we're more than halfway finished in the trial. We have a very positive result of those 179 patients, and with 150 patients confirming the same evidence, we will have a positive trial. So we're close. We're closer than anybody to ever having an approved product in the United States for intervention in septic shock. And just to give you an idea of the importance of endotoxemia, in slide 10, when greater than the average amount of endotoxin was removed by our cartridge, we actually had a 25% absolute and a 60% relative risk reduction at 28 days in this group of patients. So slide 11 shows what the time frame is like for us, and we initiated this trial approximately a year ago. We were granted 10 sites to open at that time. We had 9 sites up and enrolling. We have been held back somewhat by the COVID crisis, given that each of the intensive care units that we've been involved with has been a primary focus for ICU admitted COVID patients, and therefore research cannot be undertaken on these patients. We did in Q3 go to the FDA and said, well, to finish this trial in a reasonable time, we need to go from 10 to 15 sites, which they agreed to. As we sit in Q1 of 2021, we expect all those 15 sites to be up and enrolling by the end of this quarter. And given that we think the COVID problem will begin to recede in the end of Q1 and Q2, that we will be able to continue our enrollment, looking for approval of this product in the second half of 2022. So that's my presentation on the science behind our trial, and Chris will talk about the economic benefits.
Yeah, so the table on the right here illustrates the potential financial opportunity for Spectral based on various market penetration rates. And I'll point you to the right-hand side at a 35 to 45% take-up, which is in line with Baxter's ICU presence. We could see potential annual EBITDA contribution to Spectral in the range of, call it 175 to 225 million US dollars per year. So what I would say is pretty robust economics for this product. Now, I'll just move on to our wholly owned subsidiary, Dialco Medical, which is in the dialysis space. And I'll just skip over that and move into and touch base on some of the key market drivers in the dialysis sector. First is demographics. There's the aging population, the onset of diabetes and hypertension, and they're all contributing to the growth of the chronic dialysis patient population, which by 2025 is expected to be approximately 700,000 patients in North America and growing at, call it 4% per year. The second driver is, governments are pushing towards in-home dialysis. In the U.S., there's the Advancing American Kidney Health Initiative to target 80% of new ESRD patients in 2025 to treat dialysis in-home. And third, the COVID-19 pandemic itself. It's acting as a catalyst to accelerate changes in treatment and patient flow for both acute and chronic dialysis. For example, on the acute side, COVID has impacted patient flow, and hospitals are looking for devices that can be portable and moved to anywhere where the patients are located in the hospital, as opposed to having to just go to the renal department. And on the chronic side, traveling to clinics or hospitals has put vulnerable ESRD patients at risk. This slide just shows Dialco's devices, and as discussed, we provide devices across the dialysis spectrum. Both our SAMI and DIMI devices remove operational complexity from dialysis treatments. Our SAMI is utilized for what we call CRRT, or continuous renal replacement therapy, for patients in the ICU, or PIRRT, which is prolonged intermittent renal replacement therapy, which is RRT for those transitioning out of the ICU. Our DIMI device on the right-hand side is used for chronic dialysis. As you can see, and as mentioned before, SAMI and DIMI are similar devices, both in scale and usability. given that they both have sort of the same internal working parts. SAMI on the acute dialysis side, we have had some very positive user experiences. Our device is FDA cleared for CRRT and PERT in hospital. It's flexible and addresses clinical versatility. It is portable. It can be wheeled easily to any hospital department. It has a small footprint. This is very important in the ICU world where real estate is scarce. And most importantly is the ability to train clinicians. This takes about 3 hours to train on the SAMI, whereas competitor devices can take up to a week. One of our customers was the University of Michigan, or is the University of Michigan, and they deployed SAMI during the COVID-19 pandemic. This was done completely remotely as access to clinical sites was restricted. The experience was so positive that the University of Michigan published a paper on the deployment and implementation results of SAMI. Additionally, we have 3 prominent dialysis programs actively using SAMI on a daily basis, and over the last 12 months have done a combined 200+ runs. The next slide, there it is, just shows the virtual rollout and training and implementation of SAMI at the University of Michigan. As you can see, it was all done virtually. In terms of the SAMI user experience, based on University of Michigan's published paper, this is the feedback from the clinical team at University of Michigan. We received high marks across the board for all characteristics that matter to clinicians. Compared to existing CRRT devices, these clinicians judged our SAMI as easier to learn, easier to manage, and easier to troubleshoot, and ultimately they preferred the SAMI over existing CRRT machines. For DIMI, we believe there's a strong value proposition with our DIMI device for hemodialysis. Some of the key characteristics of our DIMI technology: it's portable, it can be used indoor and outdoor, it's plug and play right out of the box, it uses prepackaged sterile dialysate only, so that removes any burden or responsibility by the patient in terms of water system management, disinfection, maintenance, or having to mix their own dialysate solution. And it requires no additional infrastructure costs, so there's no requirement for upgrading of electrical or plumbing. And it's the only device that runs both HD and PD modalities. From a competitive overview perspective, this is just a high-level summary. When we compare and contrast DIMI to our competitors' devices, we benchmark very well. When we look at key characteristics such as portability, ours is the lightest device. It's 20 kilograms versus the other devices, which are probably, at least twice as heavy as ours. When we look at flexibility, ours is the most flexible, with the only device that can do both PD and HD modality. All the other ones only do HD modality. When we look at usability, we believe ours ranks as the easiest to use. With prepackaged dialysate, there's no need for the patient or caregiver to mix the dialysate, and no need to purify water. When we look at maintenance, ours requires no maintenance. And from a home renovation perspective, once again, DIMI requires no renovation for electrical or plumbing. In terms of the DIMI addressable market, we estimate the total addressable market for DIMI will reach $5.3 billion by 2025. There's 3 market segments that we're looking to compete in. The first is the skilled nursing facility patient segment. This is nursing homes and off-site hospital clinics and things like that. This is approximately a $2 billion market for both device and consumables combined. We have our FDA clearance to compete in this market immediately. The second segment is the vintage PD segment. While this is a very niche segment, the DIMI device's multiple modalities has the advantage in that PD is typically where in-home dialysis starts. PD patients typically have to transition to HD after about 4 years or so. And at that point, historically, these vintage PD patients were typically driven back into the clinical setting as they're not comfortable with learning a new device. With DIMI, it's the same device, so transitioning and retaining the patient for home use is basically little to no risk. Finally is the home HD patient market. It's only comprised of today approximately 9,500 patients, but this is where the growth is really expected to ramp up with approximately 56,000 patients in 2025. The regulatory pathway for DIMI. So we have our FDA clearance for in-hospital and clinical settings already. That was granted in September 2020. We anticipate our Health Canada approval for DIMI in early Q1 of this year. We anticipate FDA PD approval sometime in mid-2021, and we need to run a usability trial for in-home use for FDA approval, and expect this to take about 12 months. From a commercialization plan perspective, we're in the process of staffing up clinical sales in the U.S. and Canada. Really our strategic focus is on increasing the footprint of the DIMI device. The sales cycle in the dialysis market is long, so we're focused on getting the DIMI device in the hands of clinicians and really build up our user reference library of dialysis influencers. Over the next 3 years, and as you see on the right-hand side, our milestone goals. Over the next 3 years, we're targeting a combined 170 clinical sites with approximately 800 devices in the field. Our targets are in line with historical device ramp-ups, whether it's Next Stage or Outset Medical. And in terms of upcoming catalysts, so here's the key catalysts that we see. The first is TIGRIS interim patient enrollment / Baxter milestone payment. We believe that this is going to be somewhere around Q3 2021. Last patient enrollment of TIGRIS, we believe this is somewhere in late Q4 2021 or into Q1 2022. FDA PMX approval, potentially H1 2022. On the dialysis side, DIMI Health Canada approval, we expect that sort of any day now in this quarter. DIMI FDA IDE protocol, this quarter, and kicking off our usability trial. FDA clearance for DIMI in home use, we expect this around Q1 2022. And the other thing to note from a corporate side is we are exploring dual listing of Spectral shares. We're going through our year-end audit and uplifting our audit standards to PCAOB standards from CAS standards so that we can list on a senior U.S. exchange. In terms of capitalization, number of shares outstanding, just over 236 million. We have approximately 9 million options outstanding, approximately 12 million warrants outstanding, both from 2 separate rounds of financing. There's a slug of warrants that are expiring in April 2021 with a 46-cent strike. The others have a 75-cent strike from our recent financing in June. So fully diluted shares outstanding, just under 258 million. Cash at September 30th, 2020, 7.6 million, and we have no debt. So that concludes our presentation. Thank you very much. And once again, we're Spectral Medical, ticker symbol EDT on the TSX.
Thank you, Chris. We do have time for a question or two, so I will start with the question. Since TIGRIS is an open label trial, will you be releasing interim results as the trial progresses?
I can answer that one. We have internal protocols around this. We'll be careful, given that that it's important not to use too small a sample size to make conclusions. However, we do. There are points along the way, particularly at the 60% enrollment mark, where we are most likely to announce results.
Great, thank you. And another question is asking, what are the 1 or 2 things investors should look for in 2021?
Yeah, it's Chris Cito here. I think there's a couple things. One certainly is hitting our interim milestone for recruitment, which is at the 60% stage. And at that point, Baxter has the option to exercise and pay us a milestone payment to retain exclusive distribution rights for the product. So I think that that's a big catalyst and big validation of where we are and where our results will be, and sort of looking forward to a positive outcome for our PMX product. I think the other one is certainly the number of clinical evaluations for both our SAMI and DIMI devices with Dialco. And so one of the key things, as we talked about, our strategic focus being really to increase our footprint and get those devices in the hands of clinicians and get real influencers out there in the dialysis market is probably the most important thing to lead to commercial sales for that product.
Great. Thank you, Chris. It looks like we're running out of time, so I'll turn it back to you and Dr. Walker for any closing remarks.
No, I don't think we have any other questions today. Sorry, anything else we need to add? But once again, thank you very much. I think we've got a pretty exciting 2021 coming up, both on the PMX side and the Dialco side. So, just keep watching us.
And that concludes this webcast. Thank you.